Welcome to Create, a place where minds explore. The podcast where we dive deep into the creative minds shaping our world. I'm your host, Micheal A.J. Randolph, a professor here in the School of Communication at Eastern Kentucky University. And today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Shannon McCarthy, Associate Professor and Coordinator of Graphic Design in the School of Art and Design here at EKU. Let me brag about you a little bit. You're a designer, illustrator, author, and educator whose work brings color and insight into the emotional journeys we all experience. Shannon's debut children's book, Some Days Feel Stormy, was published in 2022, and it beautifully captures the ups and downs of emotions and how to find happiness even in stormy times. Her latest book, The Mismatched Kid, celebrates what makes each of us unique, inviting readers of all ages to embrace their differences. Now, as a professor of graphic design, Shannon merges her academic experience with her artistic passions. Her work in branding, illustrating, and motion graphics reflects her love for storytelling, and it resonates through all ages. We work with college students, but it's amazing how good storytelling, whether you're old like me or younger like you, or even younger like students we teach, can resonate with everybody. And you can find out more about Shannon and her work at her website, shannonrmccarthy.com. Now, when you're not creating, you enjoy nature walks, reading, even when do you find time to learn German and Spanish is what I want to know. It's like...
Well, I don't have children, so that helps.
Yeah, but you do have two cats,
I do.
San and Seraph.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 9
Ooh.
and 3 dogs, so I can understand that. But either way, we're glad to have you here as we talk to you about your experience and your journey and growing up in the 90s and how you use that as an art to help navigate life through those quote unquote big moments. So let's get started. Shannon, welcome. And you talked about your life in the 90s. Now for me, my 90s was probably a lot different than yours because I was a father back then and working full time in journalism. So my perspective is from an older baby boomer. What was your perspective like, and how do you think that helped shape who you are right now?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. Yes, we were very different in our 90s understanding. Born in 86, right? So I was definitely growing up in the 90s. So I was definitely influenced by, Nickelodeon and the colors. And honestly, whoever asked me, Are You Afraid of the Dark is one of my favorite all-time, storytelling type of things. So that understanding of, quick stories that delve into, this wonderful magical land really helps to shape my storytelling. But also just the colors, the characters, the different storylines that I watched growing up, but also influenced by, I grew up in a small town, so I was outside a lot. I had older sisters. So, just having all those different kinds of connections, right, really helped to build who I am today.
Small town, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Bronx kid, born and raised. I always joke with my students, I'm the only true Southerner in the class because I was raised in the South Bronx. But what small town are you talking about? What was life like? And continue on that journey, how that influenced who you are right now.
Sure, yeah. So I will say in relationship to my stories, that time period, right, and just the education from my own family understanding, it wasn't really knowledgeable on big emotions, right? I think that's a very new term, at least socially accepted big term right now. So having that small town opportunity, it allowed me to get close to my family and my friends, but a lot of the outside world was still pretty hidden, right? Especially in the 90s, the internet was still growing up and becoming what it is today, and it moves so fast, right? But still, during most of my childhood, it was still let's go on the typewriter, let's go ree on the internet. So in a small town of 4,000 to 6,000, mostly Caucasian, right? The outside world again was still hidden. I went to a local college, much like an EKU, about 20 minutes away. I lived with my older sister, again still sort of that sheltered world. And it wasn't until I went to my graduate studies in Minneapolis, MCAD, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, that it was just a culture shock, and a beautiful one at that. And that is my favorite story to tell, Alice and I went there, there's a huge Somali population, huge Hmong population, just seeing all the different cultures mix and mingle, a beautiful melting pot, and to, finally experience that understanding, like, I am the outsider here. I mean, granted, there were plenty of, people that looked like me there, but it was just this beautiful mix. And I had many experiences where I was the only person there that looked like me. And I was like, wow, like, this is really something to soak in and understand and appreciate. And I would hope that everyone can have that sort of culture, the beautiful shock one day, to get them out of their element. I always try to push myself and my students out of our comfort zones, because we need that. We need that understanding for growth. And all that timeline, the good, the bad, the uglies, the in-betweens, the beautifuls, they all help me, again, become who I am today, and to share these stories with you, which I experienced between childhood. And a lot of Some Days Feel Stormy is based off of when I graduated from MCAT. I had my first real job in South Dakota, first time I ever lived alone, right? Like, we all have different journeys, but I was 27 and living alone for the first time, new job, in the middle of the country in a new state. It was very, very overwhelming. And so I started having big emotions. I started having panic attacks. I didn't know necessarily what they were, but when your body's tight and you're just like, feel like your heart is racing, I'm like, maybe I should think about this more, right? Because you're so focused in getting your graduate degree on finishing and being the best and, proving yourself. And then when you're out there in the free world, it's like, whew, okay, like, now you can start to concentrate on yourself a little bit more. And that's, again, where a lot of Some Days Feel Stormy comes from. My understanding of, like, I was having some really bad stormy days, and I needed to find ways to ground myself now that I know those understandings, grounding. And I needed to find that suit of armor to protect me from those bad feelings, right? I wanted to see how I could psychologically do it versus over medication at that time, and still. But again, just trying my best to figure out my own path, and to capture that in essence of storytelling.
And you put it in capital letters when you say big emotions. Is that something that people are just scared to talk about in our society from what you've seen through your own experience? I'm going to ask you were a native Kentuckian, right?
No, I'm from Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought you were from, what part of Pennsylvania?
So I originally come from Philadelphia.
Okay.
My mom was brought up in Germantown, my dad South Philly, and then they wanted to move, so we moved up towards Erie, Pennsylvania, in a little town called Union City.
Okay.
So we have one of those here, but it's not the same
It's
one.
not the same unison. So what is it about why'd you capitalize big emotions, and what is it about our society that we have problems understanding or dealing with our big emotions, and how that really shaped you in writing these stories?
Honestly, I think it's the generational gap, because again, it was, when I grew up, it was the lack of knowledge, the lack of understanding, lack of education, honestly. You really didn't know, like, I knew back then, like, oh, I have, reflecting back to my childhood and knowing some of the things and seeing my sisters as well, I'm like, oh, we have anxiety, but we didn't know how to phrase it back then. We just thought we were like, oh, like, bouncy or whatever, like, it was differently thought about. But honestly, because of the pandemic, that just sprouted, a horrible thing that happened, but it let loose the understanding of mental awareness, big emotions for parents. And so I think this generation, so probably like my age and under, are really proactive about mental awareness and having that foundation for their children. And family, where, again, like my parents, though they probably were proactive about it if they would have known more about the subject matter, but it just wasn't really talked about that much. And so finally, again, because of the pandemic, it has just been let loose. And so, big emotions are really popular, again, with my age group that I write to, so like 4 to 7 or like 0 to 10 or something like that. But everyone has big emotions, right? So that can be depression, that can be sadness, that can be anger, it can be overexcitement, stimulation. Those are all sort of delved into big emotions with that. So it's not about being angry or sad or depressed. It can be any of those and all of those at the same time. This sort of, again, storm hurricane inside of you, and you're just trying to figure out where your light is, just like I do in Some Days Feel Stormy.
When you think about, you mentioned COVID and the lockdowns, as we start to get back into what seems normal, and you've probably seen it in your class because I've seen it in mine, there's still this hang up with some students where it's like nothing was expected of me during that time, and now I'm in an environment where things are expected of me. I'm expected to do work, I'm expected to show up to class, and it's stressing me out. I mean, how do you help massage and nurse them through all that? And I would think in your particular field, dealing with graphic art and design, it's probably a great way to be able to express those feelings and tensions and emotions.
You know, it's hard because I'm sure you can relate to this. As a teacher, we weren't really taught to help be a guidance counselor or an emotional support system. We were taught how to teach. And in that, comes some guidance and the understanding of relationships, of course, right? But this is a totally new sort of beast that we're dealing with students coming in with these challenges, right? And my heart goes out to them, but also it's challenging for me because I'm not trained in that area. None of us are. So, I mean, to be frank, we need more support from our university and help with that. And they've been trying, but it hasn't been to the degree that it's been successful for that. And the understanding of the awakeness of people coming to me and relating or giving me the academic, like the letters, right? And that's helpful, but until I fully understand and go through my own sort of growing education of that, I'm still lacking in that understanding. So I can have patience with them, and I try, but it's still a really challenging aspect for me because as a designer, what's happening on the professional side is that a lot of job opportunities, it's a soaked in community, right? So there's overpopulation of designers. There's so many jobs, and a lot of them being virtual now, right? You can hire a talented person from Mexico or Canada, Japan to fill your job that was a Kentucky job before. So it's a very thin tightrope that I'm trying to balance between I'm trying to make them a young professional, but I'm also trying to understand they have their own challenges that I'm trying to help them with as well. Yeah.
And I imagine the challenge of AI is even making more desperate for some of them.
Yeah, so I actually just went to a conference. It's CCAC, and it was in Atlanta this year, but it's for art studio designers and art historians. And there was a lot about AI, and it's been very popular over the last year or two, and even before, but definitely now it's really bloomed. And so we're trying to figure out how to have it support designers and have them work faster, because the faster and stronger you work, right, the more money you can gain. But also that can relieve you stress from actually going and enjoying your weekend as well. But for me personally, what I'm doing is they don't necessarily have permission to use AI in the class for visual opportunities. And so I'm very prevalent about that. Now they could help with maybe some workshopping within Photoshop, like cleaning up an image, but it has to be their original image and things like that. But what I am having them do is that we are designers, we are not copywriters. So I say, as long as my famous term is meat and potatoes, as long as you bring the meat and potatoes, this is coming from an Irish-German family,
Okay.
but as long as you bring the meat and potatoes of the copy, of the wording to the table, and then you feed it into ChatGPT, they can help you clean it up, right? I want that's a part of them taking those general education classes of English and everything. That's so important. But also it takes a long time just to get the visuals down and then add the copy on top of that for some of my classes. That's really challenging and time consuming. So if they can help prep it, I let ChatGPT help them accumulate it and finish it.
Let's go back and talk a little bit about your own personal journey. And I want to talk about your books. But what made you decide you were going to leave and branch out in Minneapolis, of all places, to work on your graduate work?
So it was, I graduated in the market crash, right? The house crash and everything like that. So I graduated in 2009, so just after that. So good time for graduation. All those that graduated that year can feel me. So a few years, I was doing I was doing anything I could within the area I lived. Which area was the closest area? They had minimal jobs, again, like the crash and everything. I took internships. I took jobs that were half design, half doing something else, whatever I could to gain that experience.
What was your undergraduate degree in?
Yeah, it was concentration in graphic design, but visual arts, basically. A lot again, what EKU offers here, concentration. And then my master's was in visual communications, which is basically a fancy term for graphic design. My master's is a whole other beast. But what was my I lost my train of thought.
No, you saying you when you first got out, you were doing small jobs, internships. trying to figure out, I
Yes,
guess,
yeah,
how to
and
get your
so
grounding.
yes, thank you, center me back. But I was just applying to different graduate schools, and honestly, it was like, well, I know I want to be a teacher. Like, I loved the relationship I had with my teachers. I love learning. I love absorbing knowledge. I find such freedom in that, right, and growth as a person. And I knew I wanted that. I didn't necessarily wanted that right then, but I'm like, well, there's no jobs available. I could get my education now, right? And maybe in a few years it'll be better. And so then I decided to just apply to multiple universities. Some I got in, some I didn't. And that's how the ball rolls, right? But I got into MCAT. I'm like, you know what? Like, in all honesty, that's far away from home. I need that jump off point. Like, I want to move away from my family to know that I can survive. And so me and my boyfriend at the time, now husband, we moved together in a very small space, so that's a growing period. Folks, live in a small space with your significant other, and that will change your mindset.
Without a doubt, yes.
Ooh, yeah, the kitchen was like a box. Anyways, it was educational. But yeah, doing my master's, I mean, I started getting panic attacks then, though I didn't really know it. And it was a different process. It wasn't going to like necessarily like classes like traditional. I had mentors, different mentors. Some of us like what their goals were, what my goals were different. So I had to switch mentors. So my second mentor, I mean, lady boss to the degree, owned her own company and everything. But honestly, every time I met her, I had stomach cramps. She made me so anxious. And it was just my expectation of what she wanted from me, but also what I wanted for myself. And also I was the first one to move that far away for education. Like my sisters actually, after they graduated from undergrad, went to China and taught for a year. They taught English and everything like that, but they came back home and they've been home for a while. They've moved and they've come back, and I've never gone back home to live. And I wanted to not disappoint, right? So you have all those expectations from your parents who, like, we are all first generation. Me and my sisters are all first generations. And so that puts a lot of pressure, to succeed. Even though, like, after years, my parents were so proud of me for just going to school, right? They're like, oh, yeah, like, go get your master's. Like, that's great. Like, they were my cheerleaders, where I thought it wasn't another way around. They were never like, you must graduate, and, you have bills. It was always, I was so lucky. It was always like, go and enjoy this journey. Like, we've got you.
Was that this anticipation, though? That, okay,
it was the anticipation of failure. Yeah.
Failure, or was it that, okay, you go out there, you do this, and then you'll come back home?
Yeah, and I didn't, and I don't think they like me for that. But it was the pressure I put pressure on myself to not fail. Mm-hmm. My dad was from the military, right? And he was never extremely strict with us, like military-wise, but there were certain things, and he was away for so long, going on different duties, and like he went back down to Philly, right? So we didn't get to see him a lot growing up as a child. Which we understand that, but as a child, that's hard, right? And so whenever Daddy came home, right, we were like, we have to make sure that he sees us, that he enjoys, and that he's proud of us, right? So having any sort of failure, again, was a no-go. And then again, that's not necessarily on his side. That was the pressure I put, and perhaps my sisters put on ourselves, because we didn't get to see him that much. So they did a lot for us. They supported us a lot. They gave up some dreams for us. And so when you have that pressure, it starts to build on you to not want to fail. But over the years, again, by having, these beautiful talks with your parents, they just realize like how much or how proud they are of you for what you've accomplished. And it's okay if you want to switch gears or, move or anything like that, because they're there and they love you. So again, I'm extremely lucky for having that support system. And I know not everyone does. And that's another reason I want to become an educator, so people could see me hopefully as a mentor, and to be like, you can confide into me, like I can support you, I will help you grow, show you new opportunities, get you out into the world instead of the classroom, introduce you to new people that aren't from Kentucky or aren't from Pennsylvania. Like, I can bring in someone from California, I can bring in someone from England. Like, let's open this universe up for you. And so I want to hopefully be that role model, that person that they can come to, that I can just open up their world a little bit of a time. So I know that sort of went all over that conversation,
but a couple of points. I remember early on when you talked about when you first moved to, was it Minneapolis? Because I know you mentioned there's a large Somali community there. And I remember talking to friends way back in the dark ages, in the 70s when I was in college, talking about they would go away to foreign countries or on mission trips. And they was like, oh my gosh. They say, Michael, this is the first time I think I had an understanding of what it must be like to be you, because I'm now the only white person there. It's like I'm in China or I'm in whatever. How did that either push you forward to deal with your insecurities or make you more inhibited as far as like what you were thinking and doing?
I mean, I don't think it made me insecure. It just made me reflect. Reflection was a huge thing, to step, like that famous saying, to step into someone else's shoes, right? And so I really try to do that. Like when I see a student or anybody having like a bad day or they look angry or whatever, I'm like, take a beat. It's not, this emotion is not towards you. This is an internal emotion, and think about what they're going through. But honestly, the culture shock was a beautiful thing. Like one of the experiences I love telling is that I went into a Somalia mall. It was this underground mall, and again, all Somalians, the best tea I've ever had in my life. Like I still dream about that tea. It was like creamy and rich, and oh my goodness. But like I went with a group, we were doing this project for them, and I went with a group of my colleagues. Well, the colleagues at the time that were, like I was year 2, they were year 1, they were from Korea, they were from Taiwan, they were from China. I was the only white person there, right? And I was just like this, I mean, it does feel like you're out of your shell, like you're in this other dimension, but if it was, again, so reflective and enjoyable to be like, diversity, like I never had that. It was just nice to have diversity in my life, and to be able to soak in those other cultures and like the rich fabrics of their storytelling. Like it was just a beautiful experience. So I would definitely say, again, being reflective on that just really helped me grow.
It's interesting how diversity now has become such a pejorative word. It's like it's become such a bad word, but I mean, it does add to life. Growing up in the Bronx, I had all these different cultures. I grew up in a predominantly white Irish Catholic neighborhood, but all my friends were Irish, Italian, Polish, Jewish, Latino. It's like I used to joke how, my living room was like a mini UN because, during the week, on the weekends, my father would have all these folks over, and, after having a few pops here and there, they could solve all the world's problems. Oh yeah, we know who killed Kennedy. They could solve world hunger, and they would pick on each other mercilessly, using every stereotype they could think of. And then they would be laughing their behinds off, because the next day they'd all be walking up the hill, waiting for the bus with their lunch pails, going to work. But that's, how you grow, how you learn, is just sitting down and talking with them. So you leave that diverse community and you move to the Dakotas. Now, I know nothing about the Dakotas, so I'm just going to do my stereotype, which I'm assuming is, again, a predominantly white area. So.
It is, yeah, absolutely. So it was South Dakota State University, and I knew it was just a 1-year visiting position. And so at that time, that's where, again, my boyfriend, now husband, he stayed in Minneapolis for just job opportunities because he knew it was a 1 year. And so I lived by myself. But yeah, I was predominantly white. But what I will say is my colleague that graduated around the same time, we didn't go to the same university, but he was Asian, and I'm sorry if I don't remember if it was like Chinese or Taiwan or Korean, honestly, right at this time, because it was so long ago. But I mean, he was amazing talent, very friendly. So there were some, professors and even students of Asian descent there. And so I remember one Easter, my husband and I, we went and actually made dumplings, and that was the first time we ever made dumplings. And they were like, no, this is wrong. I'm like, that's okay, like, tell me how to do it. And I was like, I want it to look this good, and it was just really fun, like, to take something that is traditionally, a Christian sort of culture, like, just switch the day up and like make some good dumplings. And now honestly, we make dumplings every winter, and we savor them throughout the year, and we make our own mix and everything. So they brought that beautiful, through food is a lot of where I appreciate culture too, but as you could tell. But through that just little exercise, we may have never done that, right? But because we've had that experience, it was just like a little joy that we got to do and a little memory to reflect back on. But yes, it was traditionally a white community that we were working with there. And then I moved to West Virginia for 2 years for, again, like an assistant position, and then when I found a tenure track position open here, that's where I took that. But so I moved around a little bit, but yeah.
That's typical. I mean,
yeah.
My journey, I started in journalism. I started teaching adjunct. I kind of liked it, and they said, if you ever consider doing this full time, you would at least need to get a master's. And so that was my journey, and I was in journalism for more than a quarter century before I said, hey, I kind of like having all my major holidays and summers off. So journalism and teaching is one of the few places where it doesn't look bad on your resume and your CV to have multiple positions. As long as you weren't asked to leave, that's the big thing. So, thinking about that now, how long have you been here at EKU, and what have you learned about yourself in the time you've been here?
So I started fall 2016, and what have I learned about myself? I think
Because you're still here, so obviously, tenure track or not, you're still here.
Yes. I think I've just grown as a person. That's a lot to do with the students, a lot to do with the community and gaining friends, like more solid friendships than moving around from place to place, every other year, it seems like. So to have that camaraderie, right? And there are so many gems of professors here. I see them everywhere. Like, we just have such a good faculty here, and they really just put their heart and souls into this. And I hope the up people, we'll call them the uppers.
Yes.
I hope them and both the students see, how much effort and love that we put into our teaching. But it does take a toll on us. I put my heart and soul into teaching because I love it so much. And so when I see, my students not having the best of times or challenges or even like bad reviews, like it's a stinger, right? And I'm not saying I'm the easiest teacher. I really try to make the military side of me, right? Like for my dad, I do that young professional. I try to set the standards for when they graduate, right? But I'm not an easy road. I am challenging, and so I've learned to be stronger that way, like stand my ground as a professor, but also to be flexible and understand, again, sinking into their shoes, stepping, walking, and understanding what they're going through, right? And try to have that leniency by still having the structure. So I think I've become way more understanding as a professor, but still holding on. And then just more open, again, to experiencing different things, going out into the design community. So I was like co-education chair for AAF, which is American Advertising Federation in Lexington chapter, for 4 years. And then I was education chair and then programming chair of AIGA-LU, which is the American Institute of Graphic Arts. And then just being able to go to conferences and network, and seeing other teachers' tribulations and triumphs there. It's all inspiring. So again, I just came back from a conference. So I'm like, woohoo! I'm really high on like the knowledge right now. But yeah, so that's that.
And I imagine too, with still almost half of our students being first generation college students, that must have a special place for you, because you talk about you and your sisters being first generation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
When you think about trying to toe the line between being compassionate yet being disciplinarian, how, and we touched this a little bit before, how have you seen the changes impact how you have to relate to these students since COVID?
Honestly, I think since COVID, I had to be even more bending and understanding. I mean, they went through a lot, right? Some of it lasted for them a year, sometimes 2, 3, 4, and they, it's just not them missing school. It could have been something family-wise, mentally-wise. Like, I mean, there was a slew of things. And again, it's not just students. I mean, professors were hurting too. We don't necessarily want to teach via Zoom, right? Mm-hmm. And we were missing that impact. So there was just a lot. So I do think I am more lenient, but again, like, I have to bring them back into, not say the real world, we'll put that in air quotes, but we have to sort of bring them back into like, okay, like it's a little bit better now, folks. Like, let's see how we can better ourselves and sort of start to mend ourselves, right, from those trying times.
How? I know the challenges on my end in journalism trying to teach over Zoom, because we still have to do a lot of hands-on work, mostly writing and things like that, and some production work if you're talking about video. But how can you deliver that quality education? Because I would imagine, and this is just me being on the outside, graphic design and work like that, and illustration, it's a lot of hands-on. How do you do that over a TV screen?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, I almost try to forget that time because it was the dark ages. But I think we just all tried our best to be present via email, via Zoom, make sure the cameras were on. But you could tell, like, the students were having a really hard time, whether they were from home or on campus. Many of them, like, I mean, I've been cursed with teaching 8 a.m. classes for a long time, just because of how it has to split up, and it's a curse. But,
I like early classes myself, but that's...
well, I'll say this: the students don't. So
Yes, that's the challenge.
When I'm like, yes, let's get the energy up, and they're like still half asleep, I'm like, I feel you. I understand. This kind of sucks, but we will try our best. But you could tell like half of them were like half asleep. They were still in their PJs. They were like resting their head against a pillow coming to class, and I mean, you can't really reprimand them. I mean, they're trying their best, but it was just really challenging. So I tried my best to be as hands-on as possible. I know, like, one student, as we were, and again, this is sort of outside of what a professor should do, perhaps, but when it transitioned, right, from like going online, there was this one student that I would have extra time with, and we would go to the board and we would just sketch and doodle to help them process. And they actually ended up switching majors in the end. But what I did is that I like Amazon ordered, and I shipped them like little whiteboards and markers that they could then just process on, right? So that's going above and, I would say personally, above and beyond, what a professor should do. But that's how much I just love my students, right? That's how much I want, I care about them, and I want them to grow and learn, whether they see me as that sort of mentor or they just see me as like someone who's like, deadlines, finish this, you didn't do this right. It all comes from a place of love and care, and hopefully in the end, maybe many of years in the field, they'll come back and be like, yeah, Shannon, that was right.
So how much of this COVID experience pushed you into writing that first book, Some Days Feel Stormy? And especially since you've been teaching with college students, what made you think that you wanted to do something that was for a younger group?
So my master's was actually like my thesis, right? It was actually called No Way. And it was about plastic consumption. And I was actually doing research before that. Like, I got a grant to go visit high schools and do all these things, but I honestly wasn't seeing the outcomes that I wanted to. And I'm like, this is a passion of mine, but I also have other things that I'd like to delve into. And again, at that time, just like being here, growing as a professor, becoming frustrated, not frustrated, you know what I mean? The whole,
yes.
The whole timeline there. But I just knew that I wanted to reach a younger audience, because that's where the knowledge really soaks in. I was working with middle schoolers, some high schoolers, and by then, sorry, high schools and middle schoolers, but they sort of get that attitude, like they sort of get like, I don't want to do this, or like, let's work around this. Where little kids are like, teach me something, whether they know that or not. They're like, yeah, I'm learning something. And I wanted my books to be able to just like jump into that opportunity. But yeah, like coming out in 2022. So, generally my books, I like the first one I did during the summer. The second one I did as like an add-on to my sabbatical work. Like, my sabbatical work was something totally different. But it was definitely thriving from that. And I had the story, honestly, I started working with it when I was in South Dakota all those years ago. And it was just in the back of my mind always. And so I just start off with like a light sort of script on my phone, or I write it down, and I just go through different ideations of that over and over, because the writing is actually the hard part for me. And so I ask for a lot of support. I have a lot of people read through it, especially with this newest one. My sisters, I'm like, okay, here's a new one, here's a new one, here's a new one. And they were really great and supportive. That's why I definitely say, like, you're my cheerleaders and editors in my book. Because it's not as easy to write as you think it might be, right? Like, illustration comes so much more easier for me. But yeah, it was definitely the pandemic that was like, you know what, like, emotions are big right now, mental states, like, even though there were buzzwords then, I think they're regular now. And so I wanted to take that opportunity to just sort of jump on that understanding of like, okay, I think this is going to become the norm. This is when, like, this will be a good time to release these, because parents are going to be wanting these type of opportunities and resources for their children.
When you think about that, because obviously now this has been going on for years, because you were in South Dakota in 2009?
Oh, it was, okay, so I'm like, what was I? It was 2013, the fall.
Okay, so we're talking about almost, I don't know, I think 13 to 22, almost a decade.
Yeah.
How, as a writer, as somebody putting these things together, how, when you're just making a note here and making a note there and writing with things, what is that finally gets you to think, how do I put all these disparate points together to have it make sense? You say you get great support from your family and others who are going to help you edit. But how does it all come together in that creative process? Say, Eureka! I've discovered it. I've made it happen.
Well, so ever since like South Dakota, like that's when I'm like, oh, these are big feelings. I need to start like thinking about these and processing. And it's just sort of like that little bug in the back of your brain, like, I'm just gonna chill here for a while, but I'm gonna like just tap you every once in a while, and then it starts to like, this is gonna sound weird and maybe gross, but like gonna start to like itch your skin, right? Your skin gets itchy, and you're like, okay, I'm moving, I'm grooving. What am I supposed to do? And I just knew like 2022, again, just coming off like that like pandemic, stuck in one place, right? I wanted to launch it. I was ready to launch it. I had the firm feelings, I had the emotions, I had the power, and more so the time.
Yes.
To be able to do that. I'm like, I can do this. So I really honestly just had to believe in myself and like make sure I had that time and just be like, this is the time to do it. Like, just get it done. And so when I get fascinated about a project, like I'm in it to win it. So generally, like between like writing and illustrating, it takes me about 3 to 4 months maybe. Generally the illustrations come very fast because I work on them nonstop. So that's not how I necessarily do all my work, but when I'm so intrigued and I find it so joyful, like I don't want to stop. So I'll stop to eat, and I'm breathing along the way, of course, but that's about it. I just want to get it done, see that first iteration, and then be able to clean it up.
When you think about mismatched kids, how much of that is, for lack of a term, biographical? How much of that is you? How much did you feel like the mismatched kid in different areas?
Well, here's the thing. I think we all feel like a mismatched kid.
Mm-hmm.
We just, some people hide it better than others. But even, with my book, they're not named in the book, but they are named like outside of it. And so one of them is more like a himbo, so like the strong guy, the sports guy, the popular guy, right? But even they have the understanding of not feeling in with the group because they like red bean ice cream and the others like mint. So it could be just subtle things like that. Be like, oh, should I be doing this, right? And that's where like social pressure comes in. But that's what the book is trying to be about. To be like, no, like the red bean ice cream. It's yummy. Eat it. It's cool. Like they should just support you because you like something different, and maybe they'll want to try it, right? And a little bit is about me. Like, I mean, I had solid friendships growing up, right? But like throughout time, you change, you waver, you get married, you have kids, you move, right? So, the solid friendships stay, though they might like, go off in the distance and flutter, and then you make new ones, etc. You might just have that friendship for a time. And so you especially for me at least, having all that movement through all those years, right? Undergrad to graduate school to job, like I was making and not losing, but, like distancing friends like crazy, honestly. So I always felt like a bit of a mismatch because I was always trying to find like the new person I could like, connect with, right? But growing up, like, yeah, I was proud. Like I had my own sense of style. Like if it was Abercrombie, then I was more like punk, right? So, and I'm not gonna say like traditional 80s punk. Like I was definitely like pop punk,
Yes.
We know it's like the mid-aughts, we know where we were. But, I was proud of that. I was okay with that. Like, I shopped at, like, the Salvation Army, like, and I was fine with that, yeah. So.
It says, embracing differences. Now, some people say, wait, no, we're supposed to be individual. We're supposed to be, but yet we still have to conform. How do you do both? How do you be individual and still conform? I mean, because now that means I can't be different.
I think it's about, again, just having that confidence in being different and being like, like, this is who I am. I'm okay with that. Like, let's hear more about that. Like, let's hear why I like this or like that. If you don't like that, that's okay. So it's about confidence and acceptance. And as long as you have those, or, fake it till you make it is the popular term.
Mm-hmm.
If you could do that, again, if you fake it till you make it with those things, you're eventually going to become those things. Just like within Some Days Feel Stormy, like you can fake it till you make it to be brave. And if you pretend long enough, you're going to be brave. Like you're going to have those emotions just soak into you. But I honestly think it just needs more acceptance, and you need a little bit more confidence. And that comes from, having acceptance. Does that make sense? Did I
Yes, it does, because there are plenty of days when I'm in front of that classroom, it's like, I just got to fake it till I make it for another 45 minutes. I'm okay.
We've all been there. Yeah.
It becomes challenging. How do you keep personally yourself focused and engaged semester after semester, class after class, day after day, you know, when a lot of the things that we're expected to do, we're not necessarily getting all the support that we need. Not that anybody's bad or malicious, but it's like they're piling more stuff on us and expecting us to be able to do these outcomes when this is not a factory. These students are not on a conveyor belt. It's not a production line. They're individuals with challenges that we're just trying to help them move into the next step and maybe hopefully into a better career when they get out of here.
I completely feel those frustrations. You have no idea. That's been my mantra for a long time. But I will say, like, finally being tenured and having that associate, I have a little bit more ground to stand on, a little bit more protection, and I voice my opinion much more louder. You know, like, I've always had like an opinion, but now I have that safety net of that. And you know, I do my job. I feel like I do it well, or at least I try my best. And I really hope that everyone, faculty, you know, chairs, deans, students can all see that, because I really pour my heart and soul into this job. But you know, really, it's about voicing your tribulations and triumphs within here. So some things about EKU I absolutely adore, and others I'm like, this needs to change today. And it's not probably going to, but it needs to, right? And I think faculty support, and one of the things is, like, I mean, I know I'm worth more, and I think I deserve more. So whether that comes in a payment form or, you know, less committee work, right? Like, I know my worth, and it took me a while to be confident in that and to like stand my ground and be like, no, like, I'm not going to be on this committee this semester. Like, I've met my quota. I've done my due diligence. Like, I finally am putting myself first. And it took me, again, till I got tenure to feel secure enough in that to be like, I'm talking about mental health. Well, I need my own mental health and rest. And that should be secured throughout all of faculty and students and staff, etc. And we just need a more in tune, caring facility to understand all of that. And I think they do. It's just then act upon it then.
Sometimes they can know, and I can understand if, you know, they don't have the resources to be able to do it. That's fine. We all have to work with what we've got. But every now and then it would be nice, at least from my perspective, to say, I want something more than just a nice little, you know, buffet appreciation gathering. It's nice to be recognized for that, but there's, and I don't know how to categorize. I don't know what to say. What would mean the difference? Yeah, everybody would like more money, but money's not ultimate. You know, for me, it's always been one of the things I always loved about EKU up until the last few years was the fact that I could make up for maybe not making enough money because I got plenty of development support. But now even that is getting harder and harder.
Yep.
So,
that was a hard one to swallow.
how do you separate that from what you know you have to be able to give to the students? Your own frustration, maybe that what you're not getting from the professional side. I got to separate that wall from what I know my students need to survive and move forward.
It's just two separate Shannons. That's really what you have to do. Like it is. I mean, we are a liberal arts, university. It is like, I mean, personally, I know there's the three, prongs of the chair is, the big thing. So service, scholarship, and teaching. But teaching here is number one, and so I do my due diligence in scholarship and my research and service, right? I do. But teaching for me is number one, and I think it should be for someone who is at a liberal arts university. And so I make sure to, put in that 110% to my students to offer those opportunities, to bring in those keynote speakers. I do Design It Forward Kentucky as well with a colleague in Western Kentucky University. And for this, we just finished our 7th year. And it is a huge undertaking when it's generally just 2 people. And we bring in 80 students. We bring in a freelance client. We get like X amount of money from sponsors. We make all the resources and everything. I don't get paid for that. I asked for support. We didn't get it this year, okay? But like, at least we were able to host it this year, right? Mm-hmm. But those are, I go like far out of my way because I want to provide those opportunities to students. I want opportunities that I wasn't afforded as an undergrad, and opportunities that I know, like, if they really look and reflect on it, wow, it's an amazing opportunity and they really need to take advantage of it. But I just want to be that teacher. I want to be that support system. And so I just separate.
You talk about research, but I mean, is there a third book coming out? Is it in the process?
Well, come on, I just finished the second one.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it's like I mean, as a journalist, I remember it's like, yeah, I just did this story, but tomorrow I've got a new one to work on. So it's like you're always moving forward.
No,
so.
absolutely. So I have 2 books in my head that are floating around, but I'm not going to release any information on that. But I'm super excited about them. One I honestly just thought of this summer while walking with a friend, and I was like, oh, I'm like, that's a good story idea. So I might put that one before the third one I had originally, but I'll tell you the working titles at least. One is called The Sunshine Makers, and the other one is called The Cloud Reader. Working titles, but we'll see how they go. But really, my next step is a couple things. So with Some Days Feel Stormy, because I want them to all have different lives, right? So though Mismatched Kids is out and loud right now, Some Days Feel Stormy, still extremely prevalent, right, and always will be. But so I'm actually working with Professor Matthew Johnson in the theater department, and we are putting together a little traveling puppet show. And so he got his I believe master's, sorry Matt if it's wrong, but in puppetry, right? So, and he put in a grant, and we actually got an ICCA grant to do that, like it was a collaboration grant, right? And I'm super excited. We actually need to get started on it this semester. But yeah, that's going to be a little traveling suitcase show, and we wrote the script together. It was really cool, and we're going to like put in custom music with it and everything. So that's one way to get it. And then the other one is, and I'm looking for some grants if anybody wants to help me with this one.
Hint, hint.
I need some money. But no, it's going to be a daily activity and check-in guide for kids. And what it's going to be is using my Some Days Feel Stormy characters. And so they're going to check in every day on their emotions. And we're also going to have grounding exercises for them to do. So in my story, like there's a kite, like fly your favorite kite. Like maybe that's a grounding activity that you can do, like getting that like breath in you and everything, right? But for this one, it's called like the dragon's breath. So it's just a breathing exercise, right? But it connects back to the story. It gives them a little like intent, like, oh, dragons can like breathe in really deep and really long. And so that's going to start grounding them. That's going to start bringing them back to center. And so I have them for all different characters. And some of them are like making up their own songs to sort of just like get the ideas out, get those emotions out. The other one is a fake it till you make it. So there's one that within the story, it's a cat, but the child's imagination turns it into a tiger softly purring in your ear. So, and I do the purr when I read it. I love it. But with that one, it's sort of like, now imagine you're a brave tiger. Like this is when you're feeling fear, right? And like you have your claws and your teeth. And again, like when you pretend that you're brave, after a while you will be brave, right? Because you'll just keep going over and over. So it's that is still in the works, and that's actually what I presented on at the conference in Atlanta at CCAC. But I got some great feedback. Like all the mom designers were like, woohoo! You know, like let's get this. And I was actually working, and I'm so sorry I forgot your last name, but a professor in child psychology here, Maggie, and she was helping me figure out like different exercises and also giving me workbooks to see like what's already been done. So this is not like all brand new information, but I am putting a severe spin on it to relate back to my book and to have the language of my book and to relate to little kids in a like more fun, colorful way. But I'm super excited about this project, but funding will be the biggest obstacle for me right now.
I'm listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, do you see then maybe working with the theater department and creating some type of play for mismatched kids? In the back of my mind, I'm thinking this could be a very like, the only thing I could probably compare it to would be like the vagina monologues, where it's like, okay, all these mismatched people are talking about their concerns, their fears, their challenges, and trying to be, you know, accepted in the population or whatever.
Well, thank you for that idea. I might just snag that.
Okay,
and that would be a nice, like, even like grown-up way to think about that, right? Like a lot of like NPR things, they have those talking hours, and I'm like, oh, like that would be a good one. But.
Well, you're welcome to come back here and produce a podcast about it. We're more than happy to do it.
Yeah,
like,
I love it.
Just add more to your plate or whatever. You know, as we get near the close here, what is it that when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, I keep thinking that you were probably real young when Al Franken was doing his Stuart Smalley thing on Saturday Night Live, but it's like you look in the mirror and say, you know, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone people like you. What's the affirming things you say to Shannon every day that keeps you going?
Oh, my mantra. Oh, it's definitely changed over the years. Just like one more day till Friday. Sometimes that's still it. But, I just honestly, I take it from my dad. It's like, I'm not, I'll be honest, I'm not super religious, but I always say a little prayer in the morning to keep my loved ones safe. And it's just really like I say a little essence into the air to be like, I want to be a better person than I was yesterday. I want to be understanding. I want to be calm. I want to be honest. I want to be who I am. But I want to be giving. And, just those types of traits that I aim to be. And so it's like that little mantra, that little prayer that I put out into the universe. I want to, create a safe space environment for people. And I want to keep my family, safe. So it's an all-in-one encompassing, but it's really about like, I want to be a better person than I was yesterday. So.
Well, I know you probably are. I'm sure your students
I'm trying,
definitely
fingers crossed
do
here.
See that in you. So, I want to thank you for being my first guest here.
Woohoo!
Kicking off Create, and I want to thank you. It's lively and inspiring to me because, maybe I want to go sit in one of your classes because I could never stay in the lines and trying to draw in general anyway, so I can imagine. But again, Shannon, we will talk about your 2 books again. Some Days Feel Stormy, The Mismatched Kids. And if you want to find out more about your work, by the way, when they go to your website, shannonrmccarthy.com, what are they going to see?
So they're going to see my more professional work, so they can see illustrations. I do a lot of cards, which I love, some based on Are You Afraid of the Dark, maybe Polly Pocket. We're living that 90s life there. But definitely, I've done some work for the university, so different things like that. So an all-aroundness of like the qualities that I can do. But if you actually want to go and like purchase my books, you can go to allthefeelingsstories.com. So just remember those 2 S's, feelings and stories, within there. And that's where you can purchase my books, stickers, etc. You can book me for workshops. Those can be for adults, children, teachers. I'm all about everybody, learning from these experiences. And hey, I love snail mail. So if you want a pen pal, I'm the lady.
I will make sure that Abby will superimpose those 2 sites up there with images so the people can see it as they're going through. But I want to thank you. Do I say Professor McCarthy? Do I just say Shannon? Do I say, how do you want me to say goodbye to you?
You can call me Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Create, where minds explore. Create is part of the Eastern Progress Media Network. And for more content, podcasts, news stories, check out easternprogress.com. And a big thank you to my executive producer, Abby Powers. Thank you, Abby. And for Create, I'm Micheal A.J. Randolph. Until next time, keep exploring and keep creating. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.